So we're going to be talking today about making the invisible visible, helping adult students recognize their own progress. And I'd like to start by sharing with you what piqued my interest regarding this topic. Okay, there may be some delay, but I'd like you to let me know. Can you see on the screen the British Council research and a QR code right next to it?
Yes.
Okay, this QR code, I mean, I'll be sending everything to you later. So if you want to use your cell phone, you can and you scan the QR code, you can have access to the whole research. If you'd like to try, I can wait for you to try. But if you can't, no problem. I'll be sending it to you anyway.
Yes.
Did it work?
Yes. Yes. Perfectly.
Okay, so you can now have access to it. I know there are a few teachers here who don't speak Portuguese. So there are two or three slides where I have some information in Portuguese. I'll be trying and translate for you. So this research was published, if I'm not mistaken, in 2013, and it's about English learning demands in Brazil. And there is something in it that when I read it, and then you're going to be reading it later on, but when I read it, it really drew my attention because these are very interesting numbers. And again, if you didn't get to scan the QR code, I'll be sending everything to you later so you can have access to the whole research. It says here, so for those of you who don't speak Portuguese, reasons for not taking an English course. And I would like to draw your attention because then later we're going to have the time to read it in detail, but draw your attention to this number, 22%. The reason why some people were not taking an English course when this research was carried out was because, according to them, it takes a long time to see results. Can you all see this? 22%, it takes a long time to see results. I think that there is another problem. It's really a question. I don't think that the teachers that they were having classes with were like bad teachers and they were not learning because, the teachers were bad. I think the main reason is because it's a question of perception. Perception in the sense that even though they are learning and they are making progress, sometimes they can't see it. We know how we human beings, right, and adults can be unrealistic when it comes to their expectations. I think one of the main reasons for that, again, if you don't speak Portuguese, no problem. I'm going to give you a gist of what I'm showing you here. One of the main reasons for that is because they are like constantly bombarded with ads that promise the following. If you don't speak Portuguese, it says how to learn English fast, practical tips. So picture this because we are the specialists, right? We are the English teachers. We understand how people learn languages. Most students have no clue how people learn languages. So if they're like constantly bombarded with these ideas that you can learn English in 3 months or 6 weeks or X number of hours, well, naturally they're going to start believing that it's possible, that you can actually learn English quickly. And if you start taking English classes and you're not making, I mean, progress as fast as they were expecting, the problem is the teacher or the course. Let me give you another one. Uh, I love this one. Inglês rápido sem enrolação. So basically, it says here that you're going to be learning like there are no obstacles. You go straight to the point. This one is even worse. How to pronounce English like a native speaker. So not only are they promising you that you're going to learn English fast, but in a way, you're going to get native-like accent. Let me show you another one. Take a look at this one. Fast and easy. So not only fast, but you're also going to learn English easily. And my favorite, oh, this is absolutely ludicrous. 12 rules, like golden rules to learn English alone. Like, you don't even need a teacher, right? You can learn English fast and easy alone. Now, think about it. Again, we are the experts, right? So we understand how to teach. We understand what it takes to learn another language. Students don't. So chances are that they're going to develop these unrealistic expectations. So when they start a course, they may have the perception that even though they're making progress, they're not making progress as fast as they should. Does it make sense? So, in a way, just to go back to the British Council research, when they say it takes a long time to see results, I think we can look at this problem from different perspectives. Because, again, maybe they are making results, but they're not making results according to their expectations because their expectations are incorrect, inaccurate. They're not aligned with reality. Another point I would like to draw your attention to this research was can everybody see it? This is about reasons for dropping out on the English course. It's not because this is not because they're not taking English, it's because they have stopped taking English classes. 17% they say that they couldn't see results. So there are basically 2 points here, right? Some people arguing that it takes a long time, other students arguing that they couldn't see results. Now, here's my question for you. It's like a rhetorical question for you to think about. Do you think that they were not making progress, or they were making progress, but in a way they were not able to perceive it? And maybe even the teacher was not able to show them that they were not making progress. I'm going to ask you some questions. I believe you can use the chat. Yes, great. Very simple question. So all I need to do is to answer yes or no. Are you ready? Is it possible, in your opinion, to develop speaking skills without a teacher? I can see some yeses, some nos. That's interesting. Yes, yes, yes. It depends. Okay, no, not without a teacher. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. It seems to me that it's kind of balanced. I mean, the number of people who think it's a yes and no. Okay. Yes, but I think you need someone to practice and give you feedback. Great. Feedback. That's an important word. What about writing skills? Is it possible to develop without a teacher, or do you have to have a teacher in order to do that? I can see some yeses. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Reading. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. And what about listening? Feedback. What did you say about a robot? We need feedback. Oh, even from a robot. Yes. Okay, lots of yeses now. What about grammar? Can you learn grammar without a teacher? Or do you have to have a teacher in order to learn it? Yes. Okay, I have one final question for especially for those of you who said yes. If you can do most of these things without a teacher, why should they hire one? Feedback, motivation and guidance. Okay. It's like a diet. Nice. As a philosophy, not okay. Self-taught, specialist knowledge, guidance. I totally agree with you. I can see the word guidance came up more than once, even though you can learn without it. Yes. Feedback, motivation, expertise, specialist. Great. Uh-huh. I totally agree. I can see the word guidance again. Yes, I think that as you said, expert knowledge, feedback, guidance, someone, for example, to create like design tasks that you're going to be engaging and that are going to help you develop. I totally agree. Uh, there is a writer called Ken Highland, and he says that. Can you all see a quote on the screen? Yes. Oh, I think there's a quick delay. Okay. It says here that providing feedback to students is often seen as one of the teacher's most important tasks, offering the kind of individual attention that is otherwise rarely possible under classroom conditions. So, in addition to everything you said, guidance is some sort of feedback, right? If you think about guidance, you are, helping the students, like helping them understand things, also providing feedback. So he makes the point that feedback is of paramount importance. If we look at the keywords here, we have feedback, students, one of the most important tasks, individual attention, and rarely possible. Some people argue, for example, that if they go to a country where English is the spoken language, and then it's like an immersive experience, right? They get to talk to a lot of people. So eventually, they may acquire the language. But have you ever seen people, for example, who lived abroad for many years, and then as a result of the fact that they didn't get any feedback, lots of mistakes were fossil, like they got ingrained and became fossilized because there was nobody to give them feedback? Yes. So one of the things that we can fossilization, yes. I have a student living abroad. Uh-huh. Yes, it happens very often. Because as long as people can understand what you're saying, mhm, normally they're not going to give stop and and correct you unless there's like a breakdown in communication. So this is something that teachers can do. We can help students um, not only say whatever they want to say, but say it better. Isabel says some foreigners who have lived in Brazil have never learned Portuguese. Uh-huh. Yes, definitely. So when it comes to feedback, sometimes it's not clear for everybody what good feedback is and what bad feedback is. So I would like to ask for your help. I'm going to give you some examples here of feedback, and you tell me if this is good feedback or bad feedback. Okay? Are you ready? So, if you say something like this as feedback, good job, is this good feedback? You're shaking your head. It's okay. So that no, clearly no. No, okay. How about this one? This paragraph can be improved. Is this good feedback? I can see some yeses. No, most people are saying no. This is not good feedback. No. Okay. It's a little better than number one, but I would argue that this is not good feedback, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. Number three, your article turned out great. What about this? Is this good feedback? No. Okay, okay. Why is it great? Yes. One more. You're not in pronouncing the m sound correctly at the end of the words. Is it good? Is it good feedback? Yes. Yes. No. Interesting. You seem to have different opinions. Yes. Okay. I hope I can give you here something that can help us clarify this issue. Good feedback is actionable. What do I mean by actionable? What you're providing the student as feedback is something that's going to allow them to take some action. So if you think about good job is a comment, but this is not good feedback because it's not actionable. What am I going to do with this? Okay, maybe I feel happy. Oh, good job. Okay, nice. But what am I going to do with this piece of information? This paragraph can be improved. This is vague, don't you think? Okay, I know that there's something wrong with my paragraph. I mean, I know that clearly there is room for improvement, but what can I do in order to improve it? So, not really good feedback. Your article turned out great. Is this actionable? Not really. It's a compliment, but this is not actionable. And here's the problem because once a teacher told me, okay, but what if I am giving feedback, for example, when students spoke in English or written English, and most of what they produced was actually really good? I mean, what can I say? Can I still give feedback? I don't know if you agree with me, but I believe, yes, of course you can. You can raise their attention to what they did that was good. So next time they can replicate it, they can do it again. Because sometimes the students, they do things exactly, meaning point out exactly what was good. Sometimes you have students that write like texts, like very well written texts, and then you look at the text and say, okay, well, I can't find any grammar mistakes here. I don't know what to say in terms of like, I don't know, punctuation, coherence, cohesion. But you can still, as Median said, we can still draw their attention to what they did in that text that was effective, that was positive. So next time they write another text, they can try and use the same strategies. Does it make sense? Because maybe they did what they did and in a way that it's like very natural, like unconscious. Maybe they're good writers, like naturally. So they don't know that what they're doing is something that is, can be used again and again and again. It's a strategy. So yes, definitely, we can even good provide feedback if it's very well written, or maybe they said something that's was very nice. We can once again draw their attention to what they said, so they know exactly what they said that was nice, so they can do it again. So good feedback is actionable. I think that's the keyword here, actionable. So let's compare. Instead of saying your article turned out great, which is more like a compliment, oops, we can say, we can be more specific. Not just more specific, we can tell them exactly what they can work on or what was nice and they could use it again. So take a look at this. The introduction explained the topic well, captured the reader's attention. The paragraphs are well connected, making the text easy to read and understand. Use practical examples that help to illustrate your ideas clearly. Okay, so that's much better than your article turned out great. So we are giving feedback that is actionable. Next time they write another article, they can take this into consideration and try and replicate this. Another example, this paragraph can be improved, which is incredibly vague, right? I mean, improve regarding what exactly? The main idea isn't clear, which makes it hard to. Can you all see it? Yep. Okay, so there's no delay. The main idea isn't clear, which makes it hard to understand. The sentences are disconnected and don't follow a logical sequence, and there are no examples or details to support the argument presented. Of course, that for some students, I think it's important to make this point here. This feedback might be a bit overwhelming because there are too many points to focus on. So you may decide, for example, to focus on one or two specific points to make it more, digestible, so to speak. Because here we're talking about problems regarding the main idea, sentences like lack of cohesion, sentences are disconnected, problem with logical sequence or coherence. Like there are way too many points, right, to focus on. So you know your students better than anybody. Maybe, for example, giving a feedback like this to your students is not the best idea because there are way too many points to work on. So you can like choose one or two and prioritize them. But the point is, always try to make it actionable in the sense that they can use that information in order to do something. So far, so good. Let me see the chat here. I'm always going to try to keep an eye on the chat because I'm very bad at multitasking. Okay, I can see what is last comment was medians, right? Now, uh, you may have noticed that in the title of this webinar we have the word adults. Has anyone taken notice of that? Yes. Uh, why am I asking you this question? Because I think that especially when we teach adults, uh, there are certain um, issues that differ significantly from teaching kids. One of them, for example, is I'm going to use this book, which is very old, but there are some excellent points. This book was published in 1980, even before I was born, so it's really old. Modern Practice of Adult Education, From Pedagogy to Andragogy. And this writer here, Malcolm Knowles, he's known as the father of andragogy. And in this book, he says, what I really like about this book, I forgot to mention, by the way, is the fact that it's focused on, he also focuses on language. So you have some points related to language learning. And he makes four very important points when we teach adults. Okay, this is the first one. He says that one of the things that's very important for adults is that what he describes as need to know. What does he mean by need to know? If students are taking classes, they're learning something, the objectives of the lesson of their or of the course for that matter should be very clear and well defined. Uh, I remember, and maybe somebody here also worked for this school. I'm not going to give you any names, but I think that some of you worked for this school too. I worked for a school at the beginning of my career, and they had this rule which didn't allow the teachers to share with the students what they were going to learn in that lesson. It should be a surprise. Like you shouldn't tell them. So you had to start the lesson, teach it. But if a student asks, for example, what are we going to learn today? And you're supposed to say, well, I can't tell you, you know, because yeah, because they claimed that if students knew what they're going to learn, we didn't have the element of surprise. The problem, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because I mean, adults, they have this need to know, okay, what, because they want to see where we're trying to get to. And then some students would ask, so what are we going to do today? And I would say, well, I can't tell you, mysterious. Yeah, it could be a course, right? I mean, if you're a marketeiro, a mysterious English, a new course. So we're not supposed to tell students what they were going to learn. And then some students kept asking, so what are we going to learn today? And I kept saying, well, I can't tell you because it's a surprise, blah, 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 blah. And then many years later, I, came across this book, and he says that adults, generally speaking, of course, you may have exceptions, but generally speaking, have this need to know where they're going. So, why am I doing this? What is the point? So, need to know is the first point he raises. The second one he makes in the book is that whatever we're teaching, students, adult students should see as practical and relevant to their real life. So, if we're teaching something that's very abstract, let me give you an example. Today, you're going to learn the third conditional. Okay, right. And then you focus on the structure, the past perfect plus verb, the third column, and then would have. Okay. This sounds very abstract because why am I learning the third conditional? What am I going to do with it? What is the point of learning the third conditional? If we're able, for example, to show students that you can use the communicative purpose behind the third conditional, like you're learning the third conditional in order to do this, or maybe you're not even going to mention third conditional, right? You're going to mention the communicative purpose behind the structure. So you are using this structure in order to do this and that with the language, or even grammatical explanations. I remember I believe this is going to strike a chord with you. I believe looking at students' faces when teaching, for example, will is for spontaneous decisions, going to is for planned decisions, and then they're like, spontaneous decision. It sounds very abstract because I mean, what? So before I make this decision, should I stop and think, okay, is this spontaneous or premeditated? You see what I mean? So if they don't see like practical relevance to their real life, it may be very difficult for them to keep motivated or to be motivated, as a matter of fact. So practicality is very important. Third point, feedback, as you mentioned at the beginning, ongoing and constructive feedback. Of course, that here we have to be careful because I've had students, and I believe you've had to those who said, teacher, please correct every single mistake I make. We know that it doesn't work, right? Because if we correct every single mistake they made, they're going to get frustrated. So we have to be selective, of course. But it's very important to provide students with constructive feedback and ongoing. So they see, I mean, how well they're developing. And number four, which is probably one of the most important, is tangible evidence of progress. We need to find a ways to show that they are making progress. I know some teachers, for example, who like to record students, right? At the beginning of the course or a period, and then you compare, for example, their production to what they produced, let's say 6 months ago and today, so they can see how much they have evolved. But of course, there are other ways for us to do that. So keep these four ideas in mind: clear and well-defined objectives, practical relevance, ongoing feedback, and tangible evidence, because now we're going to be looking at strategies we can use that, in a way, incorporate these ideas. So I wanted to make this as practical as possible. So we spent some time at the beginning now talking about more about like the theoretical aspect, and now we're going to get into things we can actually do. I mean, while teaching, in order to you know make this theory more practical. So for this webinar, I decided to focus on three interventions that can make a difference. The first one of them is sharing the learning objectives with the students. What do I mean by that? So if a student asks you, teacher, what are you going to learn today? I think there is no problem if we share with them what they're going to learn and make sure that this objective is going to be practical, as Malcolm Knowles says in the book, and also clearly and well defined. Do you think, for example, that most of your students would be like very motivated to learn if you tell them today you're going to learn how to use the second conditional? You're all saying no, right? Yes. And then you might ask, no, that's right, Amanda. And then you might ask, okay, but if I tell them they're going to learn the second condition, isn't this very a well clear and defined objective? Because I'm telling them we're going to learn the second conditional. Well, you might say so. I don't think so, but you might say so. But does it have a practical relevance to real life? What is, I mean, as an English learner, what is going to change, or in what way is it going to have an impact on my English if I learn the second conditional? And I'm not saying we shouldn't teach the second conditional. The question is how we're going to communicate that with the student. I think that's the main point. I believe there's a huge difference if you tell a student, today you're going to learn the second conditional in case they ask, or today we're going to learn how to talk about imaginary hypothetical situations at work because it's their context. I mean, evaluating decisions and proposing solutions for situations that haven't happened yet. I mean, it doesn't have to be that thorough, but the point is, what I'm going to teach you today is to talk about hypothetical and imaginary situations. So when you are discussing, for example, different scenarios at work, this structure is going to allow you to do that. Doesn't it sound much more practical and relevant than today you're going to learn the second conditional? And it's not easy, because the other day there was a group of teachers and we're talking about, oh, yes, we were comparing first conditional and second conditional coincidentally. And then I asked this group of teachers, how do you differ the first conditional and second conditional? And some teachers said, well, the first conditional you use, present and future, and the second conditional you use past and would. I said, okay, yeah, but I didn't ask you in terms of structure, in terms of meaning. If I use the first conditional, what do I want to communicate through the first conditional? What do I want to communicate through the second conditional? And some of them had a hard time to come up with the communicative purpose behind the structure. Because sometimes we are, how can I put it? We are in sort of autopilot, right? We're especially, you use a book and then you keep following the book and then you do one exercise after the next. And we don't stop and wonder, okay, what is the purpose of teaching this? Is this because it's in the book? But that's not a good justification, is it? I'm teaching this because it's in the book or because I work for a school, it's in the syllabus. If I'm teaching this is going to help my students to become better users of the language, more competent users of the language. That's why I'm teaching this. Um, does it make sense to you? Great. So I think it's very important to make this connection. Not only make sure that what we share is very clear and well defined, but at the same time practical and relevant, so they can see why they're learning what they're learning. Um, and why is it important? Well, basically, it makes the focus of the lesson not only clear, I mean, to us as teachers, but also to the students. So it's like we're, walking towards the same goal. It's very clear what we're doing, why we're doing this. And there's another point that I think it's very important to discuss today. Has anybody here ever heard the term uh, tolerance for ambiguity when it comes to students' profiles? If you have, please write it in the chat, in the chat, just out of curiosity. Not at all. No. Never. Okay. Nope. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Oh yes. Elizabeth, who said yes? Let me see here. Bet. Okay. Yes. Luciana. Yes. Great. If you haven't, no problem. This idea of low tolerance for ambiguity is, those students, of course you do, right? Those students that when they're especially beginners, they start learning the language and they say, what did you do last weekend? Well, teacher, o passado de go, I went, né, teacher? Yes. Okay. I went to the supermarket and I buy, passado de buy, I bought, né, teacher? Yes. And I bought, they know that the past of go is when, they know the past of buy is bought. So why don't they say it? Because they are not 100% sure. So they want confirmation. Why? Because they have lower tolerance for ambiguity. They always want to be 100% sure. We normally say that mistakes are part of the process, right? And we should embrace mistakes. We make it sound very beautiful. But it is true. I mean, mistakes are part of the process, whether we like it or not. But for these students, they don't want to make mistakes. So whatever they say, they want to make sure that it's 100% clear. So it's very difficult for them to deal with ambiguity. Now, if we start the lesson, and then you might be wondering, right? Okay, but what does it have to do with a lesson? Well, you start a lesson. It's not clear where they're going. So they're thinking, okay, why am I learning this? Why am I doing that? Why are they asking these questions? Most probably because they have lower tolerance of ambiguity. There are students, for example, who don't care. I mean, you could tell them to do this and to do that, and they're going to keep doing until they notice why they're learning what they're learning. Other students are going, they're even if they're not telling you like explicitly, they're thinking about it, they're questioning. Why did she ask me to do this exercise? Okay, what about this one now? Because they can see the bigger picture. Does it make sense? They're just looking at like isolated tasks, but they can see clearly why they're doing what they're doing. So this is a very nice definition. Budner says that tolerance of ambiguity is the ability of an individual to perceive, process, and respond to ambiguous or uncertain situations without experiencing undue stress and anxiety. So they get more anxious because they don't know what they're doing. I think that's another very good reasons for us to share the learning goals with the students. So then it's out of the way, right? It's very clear, I mean, why they're doing, again, what they're doing. Um, so this was the first one. Before we move on to the second, I have a quick question to ask you. Can you see here? Is this something that you already do with your students? Sharing learning goals and learning objectives? Yes. Uh-huh. Do you often do this to like all of your students or those you perceive that have this more like lower tolerance of ambiguity? All students. Those. Some of them? Okay. All students. Uh-huh. And do you feel that after you share with them their learning goals and learning objectives, do you feel that in a way it makes them more engaged in what you're teaching and what they're learning? Yes, nice. Yes, yes. Great. Some of them. Let's move on to number two then. Establish success criteria. Does the name John Hattie ring a bell? Yeah, some of you are nodding. Not really. Okay. Um, this idea of sharing success criteria is related to those points from Malcolm Knowles, number 3 and 4, providing ongoing and constructive feedback and tangible evidence of progress. So, what is the idea behind this? This idea of success criteria, I've been introduced to it when I read a book called Visible Learning by John Hattie. The book is about general education. It's not about English language teaching. But even though it's about general education, there are some points he mentions in the book that we can adapt. We can, well, adopt and adapt to our reality. The definition of success criteria is statements that clearly describe how both the teacher and the students will know they have successfully achieved the learning objective. As teachers, if we ask students to do a task, we can tell, right, very easily whether they have succeeded or not, can't we? But maybe for the students, it's not very clear how well they did or how badly they did. And then you could say, well, but I could tell them, sure. But telling them and making them have a perception that they succeeded are two different things. So let me show you how it works. John Hattie says that developing success criteria is a vital element of formative assessment. And he makes another point. He says, my fundamental task is to evaluate the effect of my teaching on my students' learning and achievement. Now, let me give you an example of how we can, in a way, adapt this to English language teaching. I have chosen a very simple task. Imagine you're teaching a group of A2 level students, and the task is to describe a photo. Super simple. Okay. As teachers, how can you tell if the student succeeded or not? What would you take into consideration to say, I asked them to describe a photo, they succeeded? Can you think of any success criteria on your part as a teacher? If you can think of something, please, you can use the chat. Monica says vocabulary. Brenda is focusing on the details and correct grammatical structures. Andressa says adjectives and the use of present continuous, very specific. Speculation. Target structures, vocabulary. Okay, so most of you are focusing on the target, like grammar, right? The present continuous, for example, vocabulary related to the topic and details. Okay, so you do have success criteria. Now, Jessica says to describe the picture clearly using the structure and vocabulary from the lesson. Okay. So clearly as teachers, we do have success criteria. We can tell whether the student accomplished the task or not. Now, does it mean that the student is going to have the same feeling? Probably not. So we can share with them some success criteria. So when they finish the task, they can self-assess their performance. Let me give you an example. If you tell them, I would like you to describe this picture, and as you do it, you need to use 3 prepositions of place to describe where the people are. That's one way. Another way you can describe the clothes that people are wearing. The important thing is not to overwhelm students. Because if we tell them, I expect you to do this, and that, it can become overwhelming. But if you're very specific regarding your goals, like the success criteria that you expect them to produce, because if you don't, there's another point to consider here. We need to make it tangible, right? Something more concrete. If the goal is describe the clothes that people are wearing, when they are done with the task, they can check whether they have described the clothes or not, right? It's very simple to check. Okay, you're done. Have you described the clothes? Yes. What did you say? Da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, good job. Another one, use three or five verbs in the present continuous. Somebody mentioned present continuous here. So as you describe the picture, try to use three different verbs. Now, of course, the success criteria is going to depend on what you, as a teacher, understand that means success for that particular task. Maybe, for example, it's related to present continuous. Maybe, for example, it's related to the vocabulary from the lesson. If we're thinking about, for example, a different situation, let's say that now it's not about speaking, it's about writing. So you ask a group of like B1, B2 level students to write a descriptive paragraph about their favorite movie. Okay, as teachers, how can you tell that the student achieved the goal? Can you think of some points you would consider and share it in the chat, please? Okay, so Luciana says that one point you would consider is explain why it's your favorite. Any other points you would take into consideration here? Type of film, use of adjectives, different adjectives, organization. Organization can be a bit too vague because what in terms of organization? What exactly? Because organization is a very broad term, right? Do you agree? Organization in terms of what? Like the way you're going to connect your ideas? So organization in terms of like the use of linking words, cohesive devices. Brenda says introduction, development, and quick conclusion. Okay, so clearly you have some success criteria here that you as a teacher would use to assess the student. Now, some of the things we can share with the students. Describe the plot of the movie using four or five different sentences and making sure that the ideas make sense, they are coherent. Another example of success criteria, use at least two recommendation expressions. So more focused on like chunks, vocabulary. I highly recommend. It's a must watch movie. Uh, this is related to organization. Keep the paragraph structure organized using connectors and, but, because. Again, the success criteria in this case depends on what you as a teacher is understands that students should do to be successful. And then what I try to do is not to overwhelm the students with lots of success criteria. Because if we do that, something that can happen is while they are writing or while they are speaking, they're going to try to keep the success criteria in mind, and this may affect their performance. Can I give you a quick example? Because here we're talking about regular students, right? But I have this group of, actually, every semester, I have groups of teachers preparing for the C2 proficiency exam. The C2 proficiency exam is the highest exam there is. Okay, so we're talking about people who have a very high level of English. There is a task in the exam that requires them to talk about a topic for 2 minutes. That's the task, but they can't prepare for it. As soon as they get the question, they need to start speaking. Like there's no preparation time. Okay, so they have 2 minutes. Interestingly, if you tell them, okay, here is your topic, you have 2 minutes. Most of the time, what happens is they sound super fluent, as expected, but they use very basic level language. It's very hard, especially at the beginning, it's very hard for them to strike a balance between fluency and using very sophisticated advanced vocabulary. Okay, when we try to raise the bar a little bit, say, okay, I would like you to answer this question, but try to use this, and that. If we add like one thing, okay, they can manage. But if you tell them, try to use this, and that, what do you think happens? They sound less fluent. Why? Because they are thinking about not only about what they're saying, but how they're going to say it. So it affects their performance in terms of fluency. And we're talking about teachers at C2 level of proficiency. Now, let alone regular students. So I totally agree with John Hattie that it's very important to share success criteria, but especially at the beginning, choose like 1 point or 2 points, because if we choose way too many points, it might affect their performance as they do it. For writing, it's a little bit easier because for writing, you have time to, you can go back, you can change things, but for speaking, speaking is hard, right? There is spontaneity involved. Um, they're struggling with the ideas and with the language. So it's important to be selective when it comes to the success criteria. So because we don't want to overwhelm them, of course. Is this something you have already tried to do before we move on to the last one? To share with students what you understand as success for that task? Yes. Mm-hmm. Sure. Some activities, maybe, yeah. Exam prep. Writing, always speaking sometimes, not all the time. Mhm. And one last question. Do you feel that once you share the success criteria and then by the end of the activity, they self-assess based on that and they do you feel that they have a sense of accomplishment? Hmm. Great. I agree. It's also part of my experience. They get very motivated because they feel that they've done it. Performance with good models. Uh-huh. Great. Now, the last one, sure, Isabel says, definitely some of them think fluency is something so far from the, uh-huh. Yes. And by the way, by no means I'm saying that for every single activity we do in the classroom, we should share success criteria. Of course, there's time management, but it's very important. I believe that at least for one activity in the lesson to provide them with success criteria, so then they leave the class. It does have a psychological impact, doesn't it? Because they leave the class with the sense that, okay, today I have learned something, I was able to produce something, I have achieved something. You're making it more tangible. They're not leaving the class with the feeling that today I learned second conditional. Yeah, they have takeaways, definitely. And the last intervention is seek feedback on learning. Do you remember that quote by John Hattie? Let me go back to it because this one is very important. When he says here, my fundamental task is to evaluate the effect of my teaching on my students' learning and achievement. Uh, Using success criteria, sure, can definitely, give you information, give you data regarding how well your students are performing. But what I mean here in number three is more related to a dialogue, to a conversation. There is a writer, I can even share the article with you later if you like, called Duncan Ford. He says that getting regular feedback throughout the course, not just at the end of the course, will help you become aware of possible problems in advance. In the sense that, okay, we keep teaching, then we get to the end of the course, and then a student sends students a Google form, say, okay, can you please give me feedback of what you think, what the course was like, blah, 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 blah. And only at the end of the course, we try to get their perceptions, their opinions, and their comments. He argues that this is something that should be done throughout, like in different occasions. He argues that it inspires confidence in your learners and increase your confidence as a teacher. Now, let me show you some questions that I think that are worth asking, especially when you're teaching adults, right? Because they can um, express their ideas. Question one, what do I do that contributes most to your learning? I think that's a very interesting question to gauge their perception in terms of what we're doing, I mean, in the class, not only in the class, sometimes outside the classroom, because we give them homework, we give them guidance, we curate materials, we ask them to do this and to do that. But based on their perception, what the teacher is doing, what am I doing that contributes the most to your learning? Um, I think you're going to get some answers that are going to surprise you because sometimes we're looking at it from a teacher's perspective and then we get something that it's completely unexpected. Sure, Brenda, I'll share with you. Another question is, what could I do to help you learn even more? That's an interesting question because I feel that it gets them to think about not only what we are doing, but also what they could do. Because today we talk a lot about uh, lessons that are more student-centered, right? Is everybody familiar with this term? Student-centered lessons. Okay, is it possible to have a lesson that is student-centered if students don't take responsibility for their learning? It doesn't make any sense, does it? How can you have a lesson that's more focused on the student if they don't take ownership of their learning process? Because if you are going to make your lesson more, I think it's a question of logic, but if you're going to make your lesson more student-centered, it means that you're going to relinquish more control, right? You're going to give more control to the students. If you're going to give them more control, they should try to get control and use it. And if we keep like spoon feeding students again and again and again and again, well, that's not learners, student centered. So when we ask them questions like this, what could I do to help you learn even more? It can even help them think about, okay, what can I do? But what can you do so that you can learn even more? It's a two-way street. I cannot learn English for you. I can help you learn English. Like, because think about it, even if you are the best English teacher in the world, if your student is unwilling to learn, they're not going to learn, even if you are the best English teacher. So they need to make effort and to take ownership of their learning. Another question. Do you feel you're getting enough feedback from me, or would you like to get more feedback? And what kind of feedback? And normally here is when they say, I would like you to correct me more. And I think it's important to have a discussion that we are not going to correct every single mistake they make because that's not the point, right? We prioritize what we correct, what we give feedback on. And most of the time, we're going to provide feedback, especially in terms of error correction, in those mistakes that can really affect communication. And if we keep correcting them all the time, they're not going to have the opportunity to develop fluency, right? Because picture this, they're trying to say something, you correct, and then they speak for one more minute and you correct. Well, they don't have opportunity to develop their ideas. So, of course, we have to be selective, but maybe they don't know that. I think that's the problem. Sometimes we believe that what we know, they also know. Like there's like this shared knowledge between teacher and student, and maybe they don't. And we have to tell them, I'm not correcting you all the time because blah, 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 blah. That I have pedagogical reasons for that. It's not because I'm lazy and I don't want to correct you. I have very good reasons not to correct you all the time. Question four, do you think you've had enough opportunities to practice and develop your English in the classroom? Because outside, again, we go back to uh, learners' responsibility. Outside the classroom, they should continue exposing themselves to English, looking for opportunities to practice. But in the classroom, do you feel that you've had enough opportunities to practice? Question five, are you satisfied with the level of autonomy and responsibility you've had? I think this question also helps them to think about how important it is for them to take responsibility for the learning process. They cannot just wait for the teacher, to do all the job. And that's why I always try to include a question like this. What could you do to further improve your learning? Because then otherwise, I think they might have the impression that we're just focusing, which is important, of course, but we're just focusing on our teaching but in a way where they don't have to take responsibility for the process. So what could you do to further improve your learning? Do you keep like listening to English, reading English outside the classroom? Do you try to do the exercise? Do you keep practicing? It's very important for them to see that this is definitely like a whatever percentage you want to choose, 50% job, 70% 30, but it's never like 100% from the teacher and never like 0% for them. Like that's impossible because they are the ones learning the language. By looking at these questions, i- is it like have you ever asked like questions that are similar to this, like to start this dialogue with the students to get their perception on your teaching, on what happens in the classroom, on what we've been doing? Some of these questions, yes. Yes. One says no. And they don't contribute with their 50%. Amanda, I think it's more like 70-30, 70% of from them, 30%, but let's say 50-50. I think it makes everybody happy. I've always asked this question. Question six. Uh-huh. Yes. Agatha says, also great question. How do you understand the definition of progress and how would you spot it? That's a nice question, Agatha. So it makes it more visual, like how they visualize their progress, right? Joezer is asking, should I ask all of them once in a form? Uh, Perhaps not all. I mean, of course, if you want to, no problem, Joezer, but not all of them. Or you can even adapt. But I think some of these questions are very strategic in the sense of helping you get the information you want from, like you need from the students. Oh, Aninha uses prompts. We should continue doing, stop doing, and start doing. Ah, I like this. Very practical. I have questionnaire. Okay. So if we consider the three interventions we've seen here, share the learning objectives with the students, establish success criteria, and seek feedback on learning. Which of these three do you use like regularly? It's part of your practice, part of your routine as teachers. 1 and 3. Most of you use number one. Mm-hmm. One mostly. So it seems to me that the one you don't use very often is number two, right? Establish success criteria. A little of number two. Okay. And last question. Which one do you think? I think I know the answer to this question now based on your based on your answer. Which one do you think you could use more often? Okay, number two. Yes, I was expecting that. Uh-huh. One, two. Great. Jessica, you've asked the question here, right? How can I put these within the classes, like at the end or as it comes? Uh, Yeah, I think depends. Some students, Jessica, I think they might feel, not every student might feel very comfortable like telling you the truth if you ask them during the lesson. So this is something to consider. Maybe send them a questionnaire so that they can, take their time to answer it uh, during the course, after a few lessons. Of course, some of these questions you could ask because I don't think it's will be hard for them to tell like in your face what they think, what they believe. But if you feel that they might be a little shy, and they might not be 100% honest, so you could send them a feedback, like a form so they can write, even in Portuguese, for example, because it could be difficult to express their ideas in English, right? If they don't have a high level of language. Questions and feedback. Great. Any other questions, everyone? Feel free. I only saw Jessica's question here, but if you have other questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Or if you want to send them to me later. All right. June 3rd, you may have seen this. I sent an email to some people. On June 3rd, I'm going to be sending an email to people who are on my waiting list. So if anybody here is planning on taking a course next semester and you'd like to receive an exclusive offer that's not going to be on my website, I'm going to share with you a waiting list here. And all you need to do if you are interested is leaving your name there. That's it. And your email. It's all you need to do. And then June 3rd, you're going to be receiving an email to take a photo of the slide pod. Oh, absolutely. Oh, Sabrina, I'll be sending you the presentation. Where is Sabrina? Oh, there. Yes. I'll be sharing the recording and the slides, Sabrina. You're going to get everything. Luciana has a question. Oh, sure. Isabel, would you like to go first? I can see there you have your hands up.
Yes, I have a question, and I think everybody's interested in knowing the answer. What is the new course about, from headlines to the classroom?
Oh, it's about vocabulary development. So the idea is, well, number one is to focus on helping teachers develop their advanced vocabulary, but also like at the same time, we're going to be focusing on activities that could be used with students to get them to practice more vocabulary. So the course has like two purposes. Main purpose, improve your own vocabulary, and the secondary purpose, focus on activities that could be used to do that. Luciana has a question here. What do you think about progress tests? Can I be very honest, Luciana? I th I think it depends on how the task is designed. What do I mean by that? Because sometimes when you use those progress tests from a teacher's book, they mostly test grammar. So they're testing whether students remember the grammar. And I don't think it reflects accurately what students have learned because there are many things that students can use correctly in very controlled activities. But if you ask them to use what they have learned in things in less controlled, freer practice, like that requires them to speak, you can clearly see that they haven't learned it that well. So we notice this gap between what they can use in an activity that like a gap fill. Complete the gaps with present perfect or present perfect continuous. Okay. And then they look at the sentence. Normally there is some clue that's going to help them choose between present perfect and present perfect continuous, and they get all of them correct. Does it mean that they can use present perfect and present continuous um, accurately in conversation? Of course not, because they still need more practice, more exposure. So I think that if the progress test focuses solely on, very controlled activities, it's not going to be a good reflection on how much they have learned. Unless, for example, this progress test includes like a communicative activity that they actually have to speak and interact with each other. And then you can have a better, you can have, you can conduct a more, let's say, accurate evaluation of how they can actually use the language in something less controlled. Does it make sense? Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
anytime. Daniela, when is the best to use success criteria most with speaking and writing activities? Yes, Daniele. Normally with speaking tasks, when I say speaking tasks, like not, ask each other this number of questions, but a task, for example, that requires them to engage, to interact. Um, Picture this, for example, they're going to talk to each other in order to make a decision. Okay, uh, as a teacher, I think I always ask myself this question first. Okay, how do I know that they have succeeded? Then it's very clear to me the criteria that I'm going to use to assess them. Then I decided to share with them like one criterion. So you're going to talk to each other in order to make a decision. As you do it, I would like you to try to use this or that. So after they finished making the decision, you could ask them, have you used this or that, or have you done this or that? Because if you try to use success criteria with like something very controlled, like fill in the gaps, and you say, well, I expect you to get 60% of them correct. I don't think it's a very nice way of establishing success criteria. So normally with speaking tasks and writing assignments, something that requires more production, it's not very controlled, very limited, very restricted. They can actually experiment with the language and try to use it. Amanda says, what if they don't go well during the process? Something you can do, Amanda, is to use task repetition. They try it, they didn't do so well. Okay, now let's try it again. Let me ask everybody a question. Have you ever tried to get students to do the same task twice, but the same time with like a little twist, just to make it more exciting? Um, and you notice that the second time they did the task, they performed much better than the first because they had experiment with this before, or maybe you gave them time to prepare. So I don't have any problems repeating the task. Normally, I don't keep the exact same task just for, to avoid it sounding boring. I add something else, but I think that repeating the task can be very effective to improve performance. Actually, there is research on that when students repeat the task, they perform much better because they know what they're going to say. It's more like a question of, how they're going to say it. They feel demotivated. Well, yeah, it could happen. Yes, it's important to tell them that um, they're still developing, right? They're still practicing. So if they didn't get it right at first, it's definitely part of the process. Thank you very much, everyone. It was great to have you. Here are all the references. Again, you don't have to take notes because I'll be sharing everything with you. Uh, oh, Aninha says it's crucial reflection moment between tasks. Yes. Great tips. Suggested taking the test. Yes, thank you very much. Everything is going to be shared with you on Google Classroom. If you have other questions that you didn't get to ask right here, right now, you're going to get an email. So you can use that email to, get back to me. Feel free. I'll be happy to answer your questions, even the ones that you have later. No problem at all. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much for coming. Hope you have found this useful. Miss you too. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Luciana. Oh, a picture. Yes, sure. Let's take a picture. I always forget about pictures. Sorry. Let's take a picture. Yes. So, where is it? Oh, here. I'll be sharing the picture with you via email. One, two, three. Got it. Be sharing the picture with you. Thanks a lot, everyone. Enjoy your Saturday. See you around. Take care.